And now for our program. John Gaither, Davidson class of 2000, is the CEO of Feetures, one of the leading performance sock brands in the US today. Together with his father, Hugh, who I believe is on the call, class of 1972, and his brother, Joe, they have built this brand over the past 23 years. Tonight, he's going to tell the Feetures story and talk about the brand that has evolved since it started in 2002. And I am now thrilled to turn this program over to John.
Thank you, Judith. It's great to be with everybody tonight. And it was cool to see some familiar names on the registration list. I thought I would start by showing a quick video for those of you that may not be familiar with Features that will tell you a little bit about our brand and our products today. So that should give you some sense of our brand today. And today we're the #1 running sock in America. And we've got growing brand awareness, and we've got distribution in 42 countries around the world. We've got offices in Charlotte and Hickory. But when I joined my dad back in the fall of 2002, we didn't have any of that. And we had just received the first shipment of the original product, but we didn't have any customers. We didn't have any brand awareness, and we weren't exactly sure where we were headed. And so I want to go back to the very beginning to tell that story, talk about how we got started and how we've grown since then. Features started out of necessity. My father, Hugh, who went to Davidson and graduated in 1972, went to graduate school at University of North Carolina and came back and went to work for Ridgeview, which was a hosiery mill that had been started by his great-grandfather in 1912. And it was based in Newton, which is the town about 45 minutes north of Davidson, where we grew up. And Ridgeview was a small manufacturer making women's hosiery. They were doing about $5 million in sales when he started in the mid-70s. And over the time that he was there, he ultimately worked to become the CEO, and Ridgeview's business grew. The sporting goods industry grew during that time. And ultimately, Ridgeview grew to over $100 million in sales. And in the 90s, Ridgeview actually went public, and they made several strategic acquisitions. They became a meaningful and important employer in the community. But ultimately, because of some of those acquisitions, became over leveraged, and the business came to an end in 2000. And so in 2000, I was getting ready to graduate from Davidson, and I had two sisters that were in college at the time and a younger brother who was in high school. And so my dad had to pivot pretty quickly, and he did a little consulting work related to the Ridgeview business. And then one day he went to the local mall in Hickory and happened to walk into one of the specialty sporting goods stores there. And he went over and took a look at the socks that were on display. And he noticed that there hadn't been a lot of changes in the brands in the sock category, in the premium sock category, in quite a while. The brands that he saw on the wall had been the same brands that he'd seen there 10 or 15 years ago. And he knew there were some innovations that were occurring on the yarn and knitting technology side, but they weren't really present in the products that he'd seen on the wall. And so he had this idea to potentially start a brand. He thought there was an opportunity to create a better product using some of the latest in technology, yarn technology, and the latest knitting technology that he was aware of. And so this idea for a business started to emerge, and the original principles really came out of his experience at Ridgeview. And so the first thing he knew was that with this new company, we were going to be a brand, and we weren't going to focus on private label business because that was Ridgeview's focus. And so they were always making products for other companies, other brands, and other retailers. And in that situation, it was always about who had the lowest price, because the product was a commodity, and so there were very, very thin margins, and ultimately it was tough to make a profit. The second thing he decided was that he was not going to be a manufacturer. Manufacturing took lots of investment in equipment and facilities, and so he felt like it was going to be better to invest money in developing the product and forming relationships out in the market. And so he decided not to be a manufacturer. He knew that if he was going to be a brand, though, that product differentiation was key. There had to be some real tangible features and benefits in the products if this brand was going to be successful. He also knew that it was going to be important to sell at a premium price point. And there were some brands that had been successful in the time. They were selling better products at a better price point, and the consumer was willing to pay for products that were truly making a difference. And those he would be able to take. He would also do that at a healthy gross margin so that he could reinvest in growing the brand. And then the last idea was that he was going to target specialty sporting goods stores first. In his previous business at Ridgeview, they worked with big box retailers, national sporting goods retailers, and he knew that there was no way that the brand was going to be successful in the beginning, and the brand wouldn't have any leverage if he went straight to these bigger national stores. So the idea was to build the brand in specialty stores, and then hopefully, if the brand got strong enough, we'd attract the attention from big sporting goods retailers like Dick's Sporting Goods and Sports Authority at the time, and only then would we be ready to distribute the brand at that national level. So he had to develop a product that featured some of these unique features and benefits, and that original sock had a few things that made it different. It had compression in the arch of the product, so it was more form-fitting than the other performance products that were in the market at the time. Those other products tended to be thick and bulky, and they provided support because they had a lot of padding, but they also took up a lot of room in the shoe. And so this product was going to be a little slimmer, but it was also going to have compression, so it fit really nice and snug and didn't move in the shoe. It was also going to have a seamless toe. That was something that most of the products, when we came on the market, didn't have. Most of them had an irritating seam that you could feel on the inside of your shoe. And he knew that that was a feature that wasn't actually available in the US at the time, but was available in Asia. And so he determined that that was where he was going to have to go to be able to get that feature. And the last thing was that he knew we were going to have to use some of the best synthetic moisture managing fibers to help move moisture, keep feet cool and dry, and to be much more durable than the typical cotton sock. So because he knew that we wanted to have that seamless toe, through one of his connections in the industry, he went to visit about 6 different manufacturers in Korea. And he had 5 different meetings and realized that none of those were a good fit. Most of those manufacturers that he met with were producing products for the mass market, and they were looking for big orders right out of the gate. And he knew that wasn't really going to be possible with this brand. And so the 6th meeting that he had was with a sourcing company called Silvertech. So they were a sourcing agent. They didn't own manufacturing, but they had relationships with manufacturers, and their focus was on helping brands like us focus on product development, and quality control and figuring out the best places to source those products. And most importantly, they understood his vision for the brand. They understood that this wasn't something that was going to be built overnight. It wasn't going to lead to immediate huge orders right off the bat. It was something that was going to take time to build. And so they signed a little agreement literally on the back of a napkin to agree to start a partnership. And that was one of the really early things that important steps for the brand. That original partnership has proven to be really fruitful over these past 23 years. They also worked to develop that initial prototype that we could take to the market. So he knew that he wanted to create a brand. He knew that he was going to have to find a marketing partner, and he reached out to another Ridgeview contact, a guy named Jim Kofi, who had his own creative agency, and he asked Jim if he'd be interested in helping him to kind of build and market this brand that didn't have a name at the time. And Jim said he'd love to do it, and actually he wanted to invest as well and become a partner. And so Jim became his original partner, invested in the business, and helped lead marketing efforts for the first 10 to 15 years that we were in business. And so, but he did say, he told Jim that they had to work on trying to figure out a name for the brand. And so Jim started to kind of work with some focus groups to see if he could do that. But my dad has a pretty unique story about how he actually ended up coming up with the brand, which didn't have anything to do with focus groups.
Well, the name is kind of an interesting story. I had been working on the business principles that we just talked about. I had been talking to people that might end up being sales reps for us. So I started doing a lot of things that could come together and help to make the business successful. But since we're going to be a brand, we definitely needed a name. And back in those days, I was running on a regular basis, and I came home from a run in Newton, and the only people at home were my wife, Julie, and our youngest son, Joe, who was in the 10th grade. John and his two sisters were away at college. And I simply said to them there in the kitchen, at the kitchen table, we're going to need to come up with a name for this brand, possibly one that conveys the features and benefits of the product. And Joe, 15 years old, without looking up from his homework, simply said, Feetures, Feetures. And with that, I took a deep breath and I said, wow, that might just work. And here we are 23 years later, and it's become a great name.
So my brother is credited with coming up with the name for the brand. So we had a name for the brand. We had a product. We had at least a prototype. And I, as I said, graduated from Davidson in 2000. I moved to California after I graduated, and I worked in the restaurant business. I actually worked at a summer camp in Northern California for a couple of summers. And I moved home in the fall of 2002 and decided it was time for me to get a real job, and moved back, or kind of went back to North Carolina. And my dad said, hey, I'm getting ready to launch this business, and I think I could use your help. I'd love for you to join me. And so I decided I'd give it a shot. So in the beginning, again, it was my dad, actually my sister, my younger sister was helping out, and we had one person that we hired to help work in the warehouse, even though we didn't have any orders to process yet. We did have the inventory. The first inventory had just arrived. And in the beginning, my dad had to build a sales force. So he built a sales force of independent sales reps, starting with connections that he had from his previous business at Ridgeview. And the sales reps would go out and they would meet with specialty stores and they would try to sell them our products. And we determined that our best marketing tool was the product. And so the sales reps would go out, they would give the product away to the owners and the buyers of the store and let them test it. And that was the way that we got started. People would test the product, they'd have a great experience, and so they'd agree to bring a small order in. And one of the first light bulb moments that we experienced in those early days was the fact that these reps that we had were opening up a variety of different types of specialty accounts, and some of them were team sporting goods stores and other types of sporting goods stores, but we were also opening some running accounts. And it was the running stores that were calling to place reorders. And so after a few months of that, we figured out that that was the environment where our brand could be successful. And I think it was because runners placed so much value on the socks that they wore, the socks and shoes that they wore. And so they were the ones that really appreciated the benefits of our product, and they were willing to pay a premium price point. And in running specialty stores, the staff associates play such a big role in the selling process. If you go to visit a running specialty store, they're going to greet you and talk to you about why you're there, help you find the right footwear. And if they're doing a great job, they're going to actually give you some trial on socks and talk about what socks you should be wearing as well. And so that was a way for us to grow the brand, because they became our ambassadors on the floor in those early days when nobody knew anything about Feetures. And so my dad's got another great story about a visit he had on one of his trips into the market.
And so at the end of one particular week, I'm at an airport somewhere out in the middle of the country, late in the afternoon, getting ready to fly home, and I'm wearing my Features polo shirt. And I've spent 4 days talking to customers about Features, but I'm in line at the gate to board the plane, and a person who I've never seen before in my life, a woman, walked up to me and simply said, "Do you work for Features?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And she said, "Well, I just want you to know that's my favorite sock. I love your product." Well, I thanked her. I got on my flight. I went home. But when I got home, I picked up the phone and called John. I said, "John, let me tell you what happened." And that gave us a sense of purpose, that not only did we have a good business plan, or we were making a product that we thought was good, but now we realized we were making a product that the consumer thought was good. And not only that, it made a positive impact on their life. So all of a sudden, we had a purpose for what we were doing in addition to a business plan. And I think ultimately that has made all the difference. And so at the end of one particular week,
So that was really important in those early days. And I don't even know if we recognized that that was our mission, so to speak, in the very beginning, or at least defined it as such. Today, we say our mission is to help people in motion perform their best. But that was what was part of what my dad experienced when he was talking with that consumer on that plane flight in those early days. And as he said, it's why we matter to our customers and to the consumer, but it's also really important to our team and to our employees. That's what motivates us in work. The fact that we're creating products that actually make a difference for people, and the fact that we have people that reach out and they tell us that all the time, really inspires us and motivates us to do what we do. So our business continued to grow in those early years. We continued to add specialty customers, and our business and our sales grew over those first few years. And then several years in, we kind of experienced our first challenge as a business. We had a new competitor that entered the market shortly after we did, and we started to see them out in the same specialty stores that we were in. And eventually, our sales growth started to slow a little bit as this other brand started to gain market share. And so we were talking with retailers and asking them why this other brand was selling more products than we were. And the feedback was really consistent that their products had a softer hand. And so even though consumers really love the fit of our products when they experience them, a lot of times when consumers were shopping in stores and they just went up and they just felt the product in the package, the other product was softer, and so that was winning out. And so it led to one of the important decisions that we made fairly early on was that my dad and I were going to better define our responsibilities in the business. And he was going to focus on sales and developing business and relationships out in the market. And I was going to focus on the product line. And we recognized that in order for us to continue to grow, we couldn't just sort of exist on this really good product that we had launched with. We were going to have to find ways to make that better over time and find ways to innovate with the product line. And so I worked with our manufacturing partner and yarn suppliers to find ways to make our products softer through using some different performance fibers, using some higher gauge needle machines. And so after about a year, we were able to launch this updated product line that was now, it had the same great fit of those original products, but it was much softer. And when we did that, all of a sudden we started to gain more share in the market again. This shows you the market share that was pretty skewed in the direction of one of the other competitor all the way back in 2009 when they had reached their peak in the market. But about that time, we launched these new products and started to chip away at that. And that really led into, one of the most important moments in our company's history. We had taken note of some other products that were in the market at the time that were selling for $3 or $4 a pair more than ours were. And they weren't necessarily the top selling products at the time, but they had additional features and benefits. They marketed some additional technology. And we felt like if we could create a product that was even more different from our competitors and one that had even some additional features and benefits that were maybe even more tangible and easier to see and experience than the ones in our original product, that could be a game changer for us. And so we talked to our manufacturing partner about that. The product that was in the market at the time that we had taken note of was marketed as left and right foot specific. We didn't feel like there was a lot of substance there. And so we felt like if we were going to introduce something that was like that, it really needed to have some real tangible technology to justify this higher price point. And so we'd given our supplier partner, we'd given them that feedback, told them to think about it, see if they could help us with that. And the partner came to visit us in Hickory. We went to meet them at a courtyard on a Sunday night in Hickory, and they had a sample with them, a prototype, and they put it out on the table. And the sample had this unique knit construction in the arch that was asymmetrical and anatomical, and we'd never seen anything like that before. And as soon as we saw it, my dad and I both looked at each other, and we knew that this was the innovation that we'd been looking for. And it was by no means a finished product at that point in time, but we knew that there was enough there that we could build this new, more premium product that we had been working towards. And so we took another 12 months or so to get the product ready to market. And one of the things that I felt like was really important was that in addition to having, these functional benefits that were clearly differentiating, I felt like it needed to be different in terms of color and design as well. And when we launched the brand, all the socks in the running market were just white. And most of the footwear on the walls in running stores were white, maybe a few black models. But over time, and especially as we'd gotten into kind of the 2010s, the footwear and apparel started to become much more colorful. There were a lot brighter colors. The footwear wall became more colorful. And so it felt like color was a way to differentiate and to add value. We felt like the consumer would see value in additional color and design. And so we built that into the product, and that took us a while, but we launched. Well, the other thing we did, we had to figure out a name. So Jim's group helped come up with the name Elite based off some consumer research that he had done. And so we launched the product at the end of 2010 at our industry trade show, the running event in Austin, Texas. This was the marketing ad that we created, which was some of the best work by Jim's team. but we launched it at TRE, and the product was immediately well received. Retailers didn't blink at the higher retail price point that we were charging for this product. They could see that this product was different. They could feel that the product was different, and so they really embraced it right off the bat. And you can see this kind of more clearly shows some of the features and benefit and the targeted compression, which is what the name that we created for the technology that makes the product anatomical and gives it that unique fit, which we were able actually to patent. So it's pretty unusual to be able to get patents in the sock category, and so that was a big deal for us to be able to actually to get a patent, both a utility and a design patent. And so we launched Features, and you can see, I talked about how the sock wall in the beginning was pretty boring, and it was just black and white, and there wasn't much to it. Only the packaging had color on the wall. But this is a good example of one of our specialty retail partners today, and you can see there's still a good mix of black and white and gray on the wall, but much more colorful. And this is totally different than when we entered the market, over 20 years ago. So the features, the brands continue to grow, especially with the launch of Elite. That really catapulted our brand. It helped us achieve the #1 market share position in running specialties. So you could see where back in 2009, we were at a pretty meaningful deficit to the top competitor. And in 2012, we actually took over the #1 spot. And a lot of that was due to the Elite product and the advantage that created for our brand in the market. We also started to attract the attention of some of the bigger national sporting goods retailers like Dick's Sporting Goods and Sports Authority. And that was, one of the original principles or ideas that my dad had was that we were going to wait until those bigger retailers called us, and that's exactly what happened. We got an email from Dick's Sporting Goods, and we got a phone call from Sports Authority, which my dad thought was a prank call at the time, because it was hard to believe that we'd gotten on the radar screen of some of those bigger retailers. But that really, again, was kind of another opportunity, another boost for our brand, increasing distribution on a national level. And so our brand was growing steadily. As we got towards 2015 or so, there was actually some contraction among some of these bigger retailers. Sports Authority, for one, went out of business. City Sports, if you're from the Northeast, you'd be familiar with them. They went out of business. Sports Chalet out on the West Coast. And so there were some different reasons for that. The running industry, which had really been booming ever since we launched the brand, had slowed just a little bit. There was also the growth in e-commerce, which I think some of these bigger brick and mortar stores hadn't really fully accounted for, and was starting to impact their business. And so that was a big shift. When we launched the business, e-commerce didn't exist, and so all of our sales were wholesale sales. But things had started to change there in the 2010s, and it was something that we certainly weren't focused on at that point in time. And my brother Joe had joined us a few years earlier. He joined in 2009. He started out in the market working as a tech rep, and then a sales manager, and it kind of evolved into a marketing role. And he started talking to us about the need for us to try to focus on and grow our own e-commerce business, and to start to be able to compete with what he was seeing was these emerging e-commerce and D2C brands. And so my father and I were a little bit resistant at first, because we were concerned that was going to erode the business and the relationships that we had built with our wholesale partners. And so I've got a video clip here of my brother as he talks about that moment and trying to convince us that was the right thing to do.
I was very passionate about this issue because I saw brands emerging and growing really fast, and I knew that we needed to get involved and to start this ourselves. But I didn't have the experience or necessarily all of the information that I needed to present to my dad and brother to make a really robust case for this. So Tom was his name. Tom helped me develop that. And ultimately, we realized that we could grow our direct-to-consumer business, build brand awareness, do it at a profit, and not upset our retailers, and continue to grow our overall business, which was the ultimate goal.
So credit to Joe for having having the insight that we needed to embrace e-commerce, and I think it was a good learning experience for us to make sure that we valued the different perspectives that all three of us brought to the business. And Joe was certainly spot on with that, and it has become a much bigger and more important part of our business today. And actually, it was fortunate that we started back then in 2016, 2017 to actually, build out that e-commerce infrastructure to learn how to advertise, to use digital advertising to drive customers to our website. Because in 2020, as you all know, so the whole world was turned upside down when COVID happened in the spring of 2020. And at that time, we were still doing 85% of our business was wholesale. And so when almost all retailers shut down, almost all of our business shut down. And we had a little piece of online business and a little bit of Amazon business that we were doing. But we recognized that was the only option we had to drive sales. And so we did have this, we had a good website that had been built. We had a good operation that could fulfill those orders. We knew how to advertise online to drive customers. And so we decided, and Joe's suggestion, to increase our investment in digital advertising to try to drive more customers to our site, because that was the only way they were going to purchase our products during that time. And so e-commerce really took off, after this initial softening in the business in the beginning, when there was so much uncertainty as the stay-at-home orders persisted. People were looking for ways to try to do things to be healthy and active, and walking outside and things where they could social distance. And so running, walking, those types of things, people gravitated towards those things. And so demand for products like ours actually started to spike, once we kind of got through that initial slowdown. And so that ended up being good for business, but it created challenges on the supply chain side. Because when COVID first happened, we told our suppliers that, we needed to pause production, having no idea, exactly how this thing was going to play out. When demand picked back up, we started to ramp up our orders, but our factories had fixed capacity and limited capacity. So, we were scrambling to try to keep up with demand at that point. And then in the fall of 2021, we faced one of the biggest challenges that we'd ever faced, when our largest supplier, which was based in Vietnam, shut down. They had COVID shutdowns that occurred much later than ours. And so the factory shut down for 6 to 8 weeks. And we had talked for a long time how that was one of the biggest vulnerabilities that we had as a brand. And honestly, for a long time, we only had one supplier. And if that would have happened, it would have totally shut us down. But we had started to diversify our supply chain a few years before that. We had added a manufacturer based in the US, so we had some US production that was close to home, which was a good thing. And we had a couple other suppliers overseas that we had some experience with. So when that factory shut down, we worked with Silvertex, again, the sourcing partner that we connected in the beginning, to shift production to a factory that was in China to help try to offset the loss of production that we had in Vietnam. And so it definitely was extremely challenging. We had to reject an entire shipment that we received from them at one point in time because it wasn't up to our quality specs. They weren't used to manufacturing products with our high quality standards. And so, and we had to spend lots of money to bring goods in by air freight so that we could keep up with demand and not lose the position that we had built out in the market. And so we ultimately were able to work through that. When we were, the other thing that I think is important during COVID is that we made the decision not to lay anybody off. We have this team that is spread between Hickory and Charlotte, and we feel really fortunate to have such a capable group of employees. And so we took pay cuts across the board during that time, but didn't lay anybody off. And by the end of the year, we were able to make everybody whole. And so we were able to work through that together, and something that we were really proud of. So during that time period, during 2020 and 2022, we actually doubled the size of our business. And so even though we faced lots of challenges during that really short time frame, demand was really strong, and we ultimately performed really well. We grew the business, we grew the brand. And so when we came to the end of 2022, we felt like it was time to make some important decisions. And one of the things that we did was we developed a 5-year plan that said we thought we could double the business again over the next 5 years through 2027. We also decided to develop a succession plan. So my dad decided to move into a chairman role. I took over as the CEO, and my brother became our CMO, who was responsible for marketing and all of our e-commerce and all of our customer service. And we also decided to consolidate ownership. We had some original partners and investors that were ready to get out, and we considered different options, but ultimately my brother and I wanted to continue to lead and grow the business. And so we were able to do all that by consolidating ownership among the three of us so that we could keep growing and building the business. Last year was a really good year for us. And
at Feetures, we create socks designed to enhance the action of life. But movement is our business, and it all begins with our path. We run on it. Passion. Ours is helping people who move perform their best. Authenticity. We do what we say. We say what we mean. Thoughtfulness. We care about our people, our products, our customers, and our community. Humility. No task is too small. Improvement has no finish line. We win as a team. For our customers, our employees, our stakeholders, and our communities, we'll help move you. Feetures is meant to move.
So I didn't intro that video, but that was that video spoke to our core values. And one of the things that we did last year was we updated the language of our core values. And we felt like that was important, based on kind of where we are as a brand. It was our 22nd year in business. And, we wanted to make sure that our core values represented the brand that we are today. And as we work to scale the business, remind us of the values that have helped get us to where we are and the things that we think are going to help us get us where we want to go. And so we spent a lot of time working on that and felt really good about where we ended up there. We also built and opened a brand new distribution center in Newton. And you know,
At Features,
considered a couple different options there. We considered potentially using 3PLs to expand our distribution, but we have such a strong distribution operation and a strong team there that we felt like it was better to leverage, what we've built and continue to sort of to own and operate the distribution and the customer service functions. And so this is a picture of our team last fall at the grand opening of the new distribution center. And I'll just say, we are really fortunate to have built such a strong team and have benefited from the leadership of some really talented people that have helped us grow over the years. And it's been great to see that team grow and expand. And also to see that, to have people that have been with us. We had an employee that celebrated her 20th year anniversary a year ago, which is pretty incredible for a company that's only 23 years old. Another thing that we did that was really exciting was last fall, we developed the first non-sock product in our company's history. And socks are obviously continue to be the focus. And but as we think towards the future, and as we started to build this loyal customer base, and as we have this team, we feel like we have this great product team that is really good at bringing great products to market. We felt like it made sense to at least test some products in a different category. And so we started with this performance tee, which we feel really good about. We're taking it slow because we're not depending on something in that category to drive results for us right now. But we're looking to see how our loyal consumer responds to it, and if they're willing to try and test other products from us. And the initial feedback to the product itself has been really good. We also, because we were, moving into a new category, we felt like it was important to develop an icon logo that we could use on the product. And I'll show you a quick video that shows you what that looks like and how the branding has evolved over the years.
Hey now, you're an all-star. Get your game on, go play. Your face. There's not
So the branding has clearly evolved over the years. It's funny looking back at some of the original branding that we have, but it's also cool to see where we've ended up, and we feel really good about that new icon logo. One other thing that happened towards the end of last year, which I think represents the evolution of the brand. Obviously, in the fall, Western North Carolina was devastated by Hurricane Helene, and that hit really close to home. Newton, where we grew up and where our distribution center is right there in the foothills. And so we got together a couple days after that happened, and we felt like we wanted to find a way to give back to help support the relief efforts. And so we decided to send an email out to our email audience, and we said that we were going to donate all of the proceeds from the sales on the next day. It was maybe a Tuesday or a Wednesday, which typically are not the busiest days of the week for us, but we said we're going to donate 100% of the sales from the next day to hurricane relief in Western North Carolina. And we generated over $200,000 in sales that next day. And so we were just blown away by the way that our audience responded. The customers clearly were motivated by the chance to help support Western North Carolina, but to give back, and the fact that we were able to use our community to do that felt really good and was representative of the way the brand has grown over time. And we said relatively early on, after several years in being in business, we developed this long-term goal to become the leading performance stock brand in the world. And we knew that wasn't something that we were going to be able to accomplish in 5 years or even 10 years necessarily, but it gave us something that we could work towards. And today we've made a lot of progress to that goal, but we don't feel like we're at a place where we can claim being the leading performance stock brand in the world. So that continues to be this sort of long-term stretch goal that motivates us every day. But we know, the key to being able to do that is to provide great experiences to consumers. Experiences like the one that consumer spoke about to my dad on the plane, some 20 years ago. And so we do get great testimonials from consumers all the time now. And we love to share these among the team. And again, this provides motivation for our team. And so I thought I'd end by just sharing one that we received. This was in the fall of last year. And a mother wrote to talk about the experience her 7th grade daughter had with our socks. And she was competing in a cross country meet in Illinois. And she said she got her a brand new pair of Feature socks for race day. It was the first time that she'd worn them. And before she got to the 1 mile mark, somebody had stepped on one of her shoes and pulled her track spike off. And so she ran the rest of the race with one shoe on and one shoe off. And it sounds like she PR'd, ran her best race. And so the mother was just writing to tell us, how impressed she was with the product that we'd made and the way that it stood up to those extremely difficult circumstances. And this shows these were the pictures that she sent us of her daughter. So that's what motivates us. We know that's the key is for us to continue to grow, is to continue to find ways to make the product better and provide great experiences to consumers. And if we do that, we know that the brand will continue to grow. So I'm going to pause and take some questions. And I see there's a few in the chat function here. A couple of them are related to tariffs. And so that's a good question, and one obviously that's very relevant to the current environment. So right now about 80% of our production is in Asia, is overseas, and with our largest supplier being in Vietnam. So we're certainly exposed to the new tariffs that have been proposed and some of which have been implemented. The higher tariff rates that have been proposed would have an extremely meaningful impact on our business. Right now there's a 10% tariff that's in place that's affecting us and affecting all of our imports. And so we've worked with our supplier partners to help. We've gotten some help for them to help absorb some of the impact of that higher tariff. That's been the first step that we've taken. And we're hopeful that if the tariffs don't go any higher than that we're potentially going to be able to absorb those higher costs, at least in the short term, without having to raise prices. We're also working with one of our US partners to try and accelerate production with them for some of the styles that currently are only being produced in Asia. We think that's a good long-term strategy, and that won't necessarily dramatically change things overnight, because it takes time to build up new production to increase production even with one of your existing suppliers. But it's something that we feel like makes sense as a smart long-term strategy. I've got a question from Rich Wilson about international business. Yeah, good question. So we sell in 42 countries today. It is definitely a focus for us right now, and that's part of that 5-year plan that we established a couple years ago. We think that there's a tremendous opportunity internationally. It's still a relatively small part of our business, but it is growing at a healthy rate. We've got great business in Canada and Australia, and some of the European markets. There's still some major markets that we're not in, though. We're not in Germany right now. We're not in France. And so what we found, though, is that we can compete really effectively in these international markets, and our brand and our products, you know, perform just as well in specialty stores in those markets. But it's just kind of like we built the brand in the US. It's sort of a similar pattern, or it follows a similar pattern in these international markets. But we're definitely focused on that right now. Question about were retailers accepting of your B2C or D2C efforts? The answer is yes. You know, we worked really hard we knew that it was important that we focused on and grew our e-commerce business, but we also we didn't want to sacrifice any of the wholesale business that we had built. And so we never undercut price online. If we do any kind of promotion, we let retailers offer the same promotion, and we make sure that we provide our retail partners with the same level of support that we've always provided them in terms of customer service and marketing support. And we just work really hard to maintain strong relationships. So we have, in fact, managed to grow all of that wholesale business in conjunction with the D2C, which is exactly what we had hoped for. What was the first big hire that changed the future of your company? Another great question. The first couple big hires that we made, we hired a CFO in the early days, and maybe a little bit ahead of schedule for us. And I think that personally it doesn't work with us anymore. But at the time, I think they provided some needed financial discipline for us. And so we were still a small organization at the time, and she was kind of later in her career, and so had experience working as a CFO for a much bigger company, and was able to bring that to our organization in a way that really benefited us. And so that was definitely a key hire in those early days. What's it like to work in a family business? It's been great working in a family business. We have a tight-knit family. It's stressful, and there's plenty of moments of tension. But we've also, you know, we've learned to appreciate the sort of different perspectives that each family member brings to the equation. And so instead of allowing that to only create tension, I think we've learned to appreciate the perspectives of each other, and we recognize that that's ultimately good for our business. What's the next big thing in sock product innovation? What are you seeing consumers are recently interested in? You know, one of the things I talked about with the introduction of Elite, how color and design for the first time became important to our business. And we obviously are a company that is you know, we're focused on function first, but our category and just the active lifestyle space has definitely we've started to see, you know, running and fashion trends kind of merge together. And so and especially in the D2C world, that's one of the things that the product team is trying to stay behind, is kind of making sure that we're staying in tune with that, and that we're a leader in our category, not just in terms of technical innovation, but also design innovation. And so a lot of the things that have been driving demand in the market for us recently have been design related. To what extent do we do consumer market research, and what impact has it had? Yeah, that's one of the things that over these past few years we've tried to enhance within our team. We talk about insights, and so we're relying more and more on insights. You know, one of the best sources is now the CRM, or the audience that we have that's buying products on feetures.com. We can send surveys to that group. And so we get feedback from existing Features customers, but there's also a lot of great platforms out there that we've worked with. You know, we know it's important to utilize those insights and to try to utilize data to drive product development, to understand, you know, where the consumer is headed and what their preferences are. So that's definitely been a big push for us over these past few years, is how do we do a better job of using platforms and research to inform our decisions.
Perfect. Well, I think we've both come to the end of our questions, and it's also reached the hour.
Good timing.
Perfect. Well, John, I just want to thank you so much for taking time to speak with us this evening and leading us in this conversation. It's entirely, I'm going to guess I speak on behalf of the audience when I share how impressive it really is. And just exciting to hear where you've come and where you're still going. Grateful for you sharing the Feature story with us this evening.